I'm very excited about our final panel, which is a very high-powered gathering here. So first off, we will have Ted Peters, who earned his PhD from the University of Chicago and is a public theologian who works at the intersection of science, religion, and ethics. He is Emeritus Professor at the Graduate Theological Union and co-edits the journal Theology and Science. He has authored a host of books, several of which have to do with astrobiology and astrotheology, and has thought a lot about both religious transhumanism and important critiques of religious transhumanism, and currently is updating what one might think is a recent book, a 2019 collection of essays on the promises and perils of AI and IA, soon to be issued in a new edition of 2025. So we're very pleased to have Ted Peters here. And our second speaker is Luciano Floridi, freshly arrived from Italy this afternoon. And we're delighted to have him here. He is the founding director of Yale's Digital Ethics Center. Yale managed to lure him away from the University of Oxford, so he's newly arrived at Yale this year. And he is a leading figure in digital ethics, the author of many, many books, including The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence, The Philosophy of Information, and The Logic of Information. His areas of research are the philosophy of information, digital ethics, the ethics of AI, and the philosophy of technology. A few fascinating tidbits include the fact that he is a recipient of Italy's Knight of the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit, and according to Scopus in 2020 was the most cited living philosopher in the world. So we're delighted to have both of these speakers with us.
I stress living. Yeah.
Ted?
Well, I congratulate Jennifer and the Yale Divinity School faculty for hosting this event. You're going to hear me say it's really important. To stress how on the cutting edge YDS is, let me mention that my wife Karin and I attend church, and we have 2 YDS graduates as our pastors. Every second Sunday in February is Science and Religion Sunday, and I typically preach. And I told Pastor Tom that I was going to talk about the challenge of AI. And so the Sunday came, and he read an introduction to me. It was eloquent, all about science and religion and artificial intelligence. And after the worship was over, I said, Tom, I didn't know you knew so much about science and religion and AI. And he says, I don't. It was written by ChatGPT. So we're right on. Now, is this an important topic? Well, let's ask Vladimir Putin. Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become, are you ready? The ruler of the world. You want to rule the world? AI is the way to do it. Well, you know, it's important if this person, isn't she America's mother, is going to have a TV special on the topic, AI and the future of us. So this is not a subject that theologians or ethicists should be ignoring. My background, as Jennifer said, is what I call public systematic theology, and systematic has too many syllables, so if you call it public theology, that's good enough. And I want to take a look at what comes out of Christian doctrine. I want to take a look at the technology of artificial intelligence and understand it in its cultural meaning, not just context, but what meaning it has. My mini tradition comes from the University of Chicago, tradition of Martin Marty, who just recently passed, and many of us miss him dearly. David Tracy also was the one who coined the idea that theologians are responsible to three publics: the church, the academy, and the wider culture. So here's my working definition of public systematic theology. It's conceived in the church, critically honed in the academy, and offered to the wider culture for the sake of the common good. Offered to the church, that's fine. But is there anything we can say to the wider culture that the wider culture deems to be valuable? All right, the topic assigned is eschatological hope, AI, and I presume maybe what the alternative might be. Here's my question: how does the transhumanist utopia, replete with immortality, compare with Christian eschatology? So that's where we're going to end up. I like the title of the conference, End. End. In English, it could mean telos in Greek, right? Purpose or goal, enteleke. Or finis in Latin, finish, end. And in the case of AI, it means both of these things. Or let me just say, that's the key that unlocks the discussion in two different ways. What is the end of humanity, and how does artificial intelligence fit within loci such as Imago Dei and the fall into sin? When I think about the things that a systematic theologian can offer the wider culture that may be of interest, anthropology is the first one that appears on the list. So Imago Dei and fall into sin. Well, what's the end of humanity in terms of telos? How about intelligence? AI, in a somewhat inarticulate way, and transhumanism in a very specific way, says that which distinguishes the human is intelligence, and we're going to enhance it, we're going to expand it. Well, what do Christians think about that? Well, as Paul Schertz reminded us, certainly the Western Christian tradition has always had a high opinion of reason. Certainly St. Thomas Aquinas did. You got to have intelligence to reason, don't you? Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo and Isaac Newton all thought that God has a rational mind. God created the world with the laws of nature and then gave the human race a rational mind to study nature and learn the mind of God. Mathematics, reason. Well, that's a good reason to celebrate intelligence, isn't it? But if you ask Christians, well, what is it that we really celebrate about being human? You almost never hear intelligence even mentioned. I'd like to be like Adam and Eve were before they ate that forbidden fruit. Or I'd like to be more Christ-like. And if somebody says, I'd like to be more Christ-like, how often do you say, I'd like to be intelligent like Jesus? That's usually not mentioned. So here's an orthodox vision of the end of humanity. The archetype of humanity is Christ, not even Adam and Eve. The archetype of humanity is Christ. Christ is the highest realization of humanity, not naturally constitutes the goal of humankind's upward journey the beginning but also the end of history. All right, intelligence doesn't even fit on the list. Well, if you and I are going to move towards our true humanity, what are we going to do? Here's Professor Tanner. United by Christ through the workings of the Spirit. I have a little blog. I announced a couple of weeks ago that Elon Musk had fired the Holy Spirit, and the Trinity's annual budget went down by a third. Our lives are to be formed according to the mode of Jesus' own life, the mode of the second person of the Trinity, and thereby incorporated within the workings ad extra of the Trinity. I actually think because of the Spirit and the incarnate Jesus that we make it into the imminent perichoresis. But at any rate, intelligence is not the criterion here. What about humans in community? Here's Jennifer. Democratic institutions need democratically formed people. Should they be intelligent, I wonder? People capable of seeking the common good or better goods in common to inhabit and sustain them. I think the common good is one, even though our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters give that to us, I think everybody intuitively says, well, of course, of course. How about the end of humanity as the finish, as the extinction of the human species? Here's a science fiction writer on the cusp, front end, of transhumanism. With the creation of superhuman intelligence, the human era will be ended. Nick Bostrom at Oxford. Machine intelligence is the last invention Homo sapiens will ever have to make. The image here is that as we create AGI, or artificial general intelligence, it won't be long after that, and we'll arrive at superintelligence, and then superintelligence will look back at you and me and say, boy, were my creators dumb. And if superintelligence then continues to generate still more superintelligence and still more superintelligence, you and I will become outdated. Could that mean the end of the human species? These people love to frame everything in evolutionary terms. Does that make transhumanists suicidal? Sometimes, but sometimes they like the idea of enhancing, as Paul Schurz mentioned, enhancing the human race to a higher level of competence, ability, but it's all measured in intelligence. Here's my story. 25 years ago, Stanford University calls together some Silicon Valley software engineers, and they want to talk about the ethics of artificial intelligence. One of the things I've noticed is that people, techies who are in the business, like to talk about ethics, and some of them recognize that they don't know how to talk about ethics, and so they invite in ethicists to give them advice. Isn't that a marvelous human trait? So I trucked down there. I'm going to give my presentation on the ethics of AI, and we're on coffee break, and drifting out into the garden, I think it was Nick Bostrom was holding forth about not artificial intelligence, but intelligence amplification. So what we'll do is we'll take this small microchip, which is a computer that has on it the entire Encyclopedia Britannica. Notice he didn't say Wikipedia, he's from Britain. So the Encyclopedia Britannica, and we'll surgically implant it in a person's brain, and then whenever you, if you have the implant, need information, you'll have immediate access. Well, everybody's sipping their coffee. That's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. And then Bostrom goes on, and then after this access to all this information, there will come a moment in which a threshold will be crossed, and the intelligence of the person with the implant will take a leap in advance. I want to say, I'm sorry, theoretically that doesn't wash. Access to information and intelligence are not linked in that way. And I don't remember if I spoke up or not, but all the disciples were enthralled now. And here's what comes next. So he says, but you know, the encyclopedias get out of date. How are we going to update them? Answer, we have a satellite. And this satellite, every 2 weeks, will beam down an update for the encyclopedia that is implanted in our brains. Isn't that great? Now everybody bats that one around a little bit. Bostrom goes on. Now let's consider who is in charge of the satellite. A friendly, benign, educational institution, maybe Yale, or a political tyrant who might send false information. And suddenly, the information you and I have access to in our brain is misleading, or maybe propaganda. And that's when I interrupted. I can think of something worse than false information and propaganda, that my brain is constantly playing Cars for Kids commercials. So almost every projection, speculation, leads to a divide, a moral divide. All right, let's talk about that moment of the singularity, that point where information access allegedly leaps into superintelligence, whether it's within the computer or whether it's within the enhanced human brain. And here's Ray Kurzweil founded Singularity University, not far from my house at the NASA base. The purpose of the universe is not God, but it's nice to ground your ontology in something beyond your own subjectivity. The purpose of the universe reflects the same purpose as our lives, to move toward greater intelligence and knowledge. So you can ask yourself, is that the purpose of the universe? According to Ray, it is. We will, within this century, be ready to infuse our solar system with our intelligence through self-replicating, non-biological intelligence. It will then spread out to the rest of the universe. So, enhanced superintelligence from Earth will emanate and conquer the universe on the universe's own terms, namely increased intelligence. Well, this notion of the singularity came to a big public head in 2023, as you probably remember, when those billionaires whom you saw at the presidential inauguration standing right behind the 47th president got worried. Oh my gosh, what will happen if superintelligence actually arrives? This particular diagram doesn't exactly divide the two teams rightly, because Bill Gates went on the speaker circuit to warn people about the dangers of the arrival of superintelligence, etc. So it's hard to know. But Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak did sign a letter that said we should have a pause in the development of AI until the government can give us guardrails within which to work. Can you imagine a business person going to the government and saying, would you please govern me? That happened. That actually happened. Jeffrey Hinton, the father of AI software, did go on the speaker circuit. We need now ethicists. You know, ethicists are going to earn an honest living these days. We need ethicists to provide the guardrails for this industry. Not everyone agrees. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, oh, forget that. Full speed ahead. Actually, there are two issues that were of concern and still are. The superintelligence takeover, which would render the human race extinct eventually, or maybe keep us around for pets like we have dogs and cats. Then the other one is human malfactors. What happens if the wrong people, as Nick Bostrom was suggesting, get a hold of the satellite that beams down advertising? What if they get a hold of it? After all, Vladimir Putin wants to be the one. Here's Fifi Lee. And she's talking about superintelligence. How do we guard against it? Well, here's the way we do it. We think of AI as a tool. Oh, we've had lots of discussions here about personification and all that kind of thing. But, says Dr. Lee, who grew up in People's Republic of China, is now a professor at Stanford. Some people call her the godmother of AI. Keep it as a tool. I don't want to give agency to AI, deny agency to AI. I want it to be used by humans. Keep it a tool. And if we can control it, then it won't become dangerous. The technical word for that is alignment. Keep AI aligned with human values. Well, there's 2 points that Fifi Lee misses. Number one was brought up earlier in the discussion of Heidegger. A close look will show that our technology isn't just a tool. A little more complicated than that. However, that's the discussion that's going on. But then the second one is, oh, well, let's keep AI aligned with human values, but what are those values? I don't know if you've read the new book by Chuck Schumer yet on anti-Semitism in America. And Senator Schumer says, you know, from the Second World War to the present, this has been a golden age for Jews in America. But suddenly, there's this new engulfment of anti-Semitism. It's everywhere. It's here. It's there. And what accounts for the change? Had it gone away? No, he says, it was always there, but it was kind of buried, and now it's coming gushing forth again. Technology, social media. Just as technology has created more fear of change in society, which can motivate people to find scapegoats, fear of change motivates people to find scapegoats. And that puts us on the cusp then of the revival of anti-Semitism. Advances in communications technologies have allowed prejudices and biases to spread more deeply and more widely. There was a little bit of discussion, I think, in the last period about biases in large language models. So LLMs frequently have biases slip in. Why? Well, because it's there in the language. And to root out bias and prejudice, you'd have to be very deliberate. How are you going to do that? Well, it's a matter of discussion. But note, the question here is, who's responsible for Senator Schumer to feel the pressures of anti-Semitism? Is it the digital technology, or is it the humans who are using digital technology as a tool? Here's Alan Weisenbacher. Humans will pass their penchant for sin onto their creations. Now, this is a book I edited earlier this year, The Promise and Perils of AI and IA. And Alan is a Methodist pastor who specializes in addiction. Now, he's a Methodist, so he believes in transformation. He believes in sanctification. And he's studied neuroscience. How can we trick our brains into becoming more holy? So if you like that area of discussion, read Alan's very insightful article here. Here's Luciano, who will be speaking in a minute, and I'll be glad to hear him expand on this question: who is morally responsible? Is it the AI, or is it the designer of the AI? Ultimately, I reject the view that technology in itself has responsibility. It's us. We build it. We decide it. It happens through different generations, different people. And that's one of the things Chuck Schumer is saying. The seeds of anti-Semitism, they've been kind of growing in the garden all along. It just wasn't invented day before yesterday. It happens through different generations, different people, different circumstances, and at some point we realize we have made a big mistake. Am I ruining your day yet? As I said, in 2023, the techies asked Uncle Sam for a little ethical help. The Biden administration made an attempt. There were other attempts in Europe and other parts of the world. And at least for a period of time, there seemed to be a growing consensus. Boy, we need to get control of AI before it gets us. I think that's evaporated over the last year or so. Here's a little side note. People who are asked in their employment to work with AI, women are reluctant. Women are adopting generative AI technology at a significantly lower rate than men, in many cases because women question, yeah, why are you not doing this? They question whether it's ethical to use the tools. It's cheating. Well, we all knew that women were more ethical than men, didn't we? All right, the Center for AI Safety. How about violence? By the way, I'm going too slowly here. All right, what about the social ramifications of working hard at maintaining, as Fifi Lee says, human control so that it doesn't get out of control? What happens? According to this article, came out this week in a new journal called AI Frontiers, democracy comes to an end and totalitarianism takes over. What's their argument? Consider what it means for ASI, that's the S is for superintelligence, artificial superintelligence, is to provide decisive military advantage over other states, okay? The country with the best AI is going to have the best weapons. Such a system would, by definition, be more powerful than the combined militaries of global superpowers. Vladimir Putin is very aware of this. Now, what happens next? The small group controlling this system, whether a government agency, a private company, or some hybrid, would therefore wield unprecedented power, not just internationally, but domestically. the ASI controllers would have a decisive advantage over every other institution in American society, including the military, intelligence agencies, and law enforcement. All right, suppose you are one of those techie billionaires standing behind the 47th president. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? In 5 years from now, the power is not going to be in the Congress, it's not going to be in the courts, it's not even going to be in the executive branch. It's going to be right here on our computers. Take a look at these four figures. The guy on the left, Curtis Yarvin. How many has ever heard of him? I expect, a couple people. All right, if I get it wrong, you correct me. Curtis Yarvin is a fascist philosopher. He believes that democracy is dead. All we need to do now is bury it. Who should take it over? The most intelligent in our society, who are the computer people. To his right is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel made his billions with PayPal, and Peter Thiel believes in internationalism, not nationalism. Therefore, what we need is a currency such as Bitcoin that is not confined to one country. Not the US dollar, not the euro. We don't need the dollar. Peter Thiel supports Curtis Yarvin financially. He's also the one that paid for J.D. Vance to rise out of obscurity to become the vice president if the Republican Party would want Silicon Valley money. Both Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are disciples of Curtis Yarvin, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear sometimes in Vance's speeches Yarvin's platitudes, such as, we have to have an aggressive war against the university. Why? Because the university is the #1 institution that stands against the creation of the monarchy. And the monarch will look like a startup CEO who will rule the nation as democracy becomes history. I'm not making this up. With regard to chainsaw budgeting, what's the goal there? It's to render the U.S. government dysfunctional so that the functions of the government are turned over to private enterprise and run by artificial intelligence. I think that after the 2023 watershed, there are certain individuals who think we're going to get control of AI before the competition does. Can I prove that? No. I'd like to ask Elon Musk to confirm that, but he doesn't respond to my emails. All right, I think I'm using too much time here. Let me skip digital religion. Oh, wait, you got to do this one, right? All right, this magazine, Pax Lumina, let me recommend it. It is, in my opinion, the best organ in public theology. It's published in Kerala, India, and one of my former students is largely responsible. Pax Lumina says, don't worry about AI becoming religious because it'll never become conscious. I really liked William Schweiker's presentation yesterday because he fleshed it out. Consciousness includes conscience, it includes self-criticism, and all of that kind of thing. To my observation, they're probably right on this, but nevertheless, we need to wait empirically and find out whether AI, in fact, does become conscious, and then if Dr. Schweiker has his way, then we have to see if it develops a conscience. Maybe they'll come together. Marius, as you heard, he wants to give serious consideration to that particular possibility. I need to skip over some here. Oh, I got to go back. You can see Buddhabot is a teacher of Buddhist doctrine, and then on the right we have a Lutheran pastor who will lead worship, and you can program in your prayers, and the robot pastor will pray for you. Now, if you ask the robot pastor a theological question, please know it's a Lutheran robot pastor, so the answer to every question is justification by faith. Christian transhumanism. Now, in Christian transhumanism, and this is a dynamic organization fully embracing the transhumanist vision, maintaining a Christian understanding of eschatology, not replacing the human race and having the human race go extinct, but rather to make us more fully human. And you can see that I raised at the beginning of the talk, what does it mean to be fully human? More intelligent? No. It means all these other relational dimensions that we have with God and with our neighbor. Now, here's the last section, and I'm sorry if I'm talking. All right, quickly.
Maybe go to the conclusion.
Go to the conclusion. Okay, all right. Okay. I overplanned. Just a quickie, this is a brain scientist at Scripps who says if you get that brain implant, it's not going to improve your soul, okay? All right. All right, finally, okay. What's the difference between the eschatology of the transhumanists and Christian new creation? The transhumanists will give you immortality either through radical life extension or the uploading of your brain into the computer, as Ray Kurzweil would say. But here's what you don't get: redemption. You're going to be just as sinful on the other side as you were on this side. Whereas for Christians, the doctrine of the new creation that's based upon what happens to the world looks like the resurrection of Jesus on Easter. You get transformation and you get redemption. Big difference. Finally, if you like this field, join AI and Faith. It's in Seattle, centered in Seattle, made up of software engineers and theologians representing different religions, not just the Christians. And it's one that has a monthly newsletter. Very, very thoughtful. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ted. And I'm sure if people are interested in the full presentation, they could email you and you'd probably be willing to share it. So we'll just get the computer set up for Professor Floridi.
Yes, I'll grab a water for you. And as Monty Python would say, and now for something different. I'm not quite sure how many of you are followers of Monty Python. First of all, a reassuring piece of news. That might be the only important thing I said during my presentation. Nick Bostrom is not at Oxford anymore. That is important.
Oxford, you said?
It's been out of Oxford for a while. Having said that, which is an important thing, since we are on record, I will not tell you why, but the news are available for anyone who has access to Google. Jennifer, thank you so much for this invitation. I rushed here. I did not want to miss the meeting, and I know I have about half an hour to go through gazillions, I'm not the only one, of slides. If I go too fast, the slides will look like a movie, so I'll try not to. But with the watch in front of me, I have a lot that I would like to share. Hopefully, it will be intelligible, but if not, blame the philosopher, not the message. So there's a lot that I'd like to tell you about that topic, which showed in the first slide. The topic today for this half an hour together is hope. And I know I'm stepping in a territory that is not really a philosophical field, not so much. So forgive me if I oversimplify a few points that some of you know very well. This is the introduction to what I'm going to tell you. There will be a little bit of a warming up. Then I will define hope, not that there is any necessity, but for once, philosophers actually agree on what hope is. Trust me, that is a rare occasion. We do not agree almost on anything, but on this point, there's agreement. A tiny bit for the mathematician and the logicians in the room, in case you wonder, what's the logic of hope and how technology has appropriated hope as a discourse, including AI, and how, and that will be the most controversial bit, we may regain a better kind of hope. To oversimplify, has been a long day and a long conference. Imagine that someone has, as a main hope, the next iPhone. Well, that's not exactly what you were expecting in terms of what do you hope in your life. So I will change that in something a little bit more worthwhile. Conclusion, and we're done. Everything in about 29 minutes or so. We'll see. Let me just move to the next. So the first part is this simple idea, conceptual borrowing. It was introduced some time ago by Carl Schmitt, a fantastic intellect and a bloody Nazi. The two things can go hand in hand, trust me. You can be a political Nazi and a real profound thinker. He had this view that when a new discipline like political science emerged, had to appropriate the vocabulary of power. The only discipline around the world where power had been theorized was theology. And so it's not an accident that political science, at the beginning of its history, start talking about power in theological terms. We're talking about Hobbes, for example. Imagine sovereignty in Hobbes comes straight from a theological discourse. Kia and I, Kia being the genius to whom I am married, also a professor of neuroscience here, wrote this piece on showing how the emergence of computer science, and especially AI, had to appropriate the vocabulary of agency. The only disciplines around that had ever spoken about agency intelligently were social sciences, especially anthropology. So it's not an accident that AI appropriated the vocabulary of course, anthropology. Meanwhile, at the same time, unfortunately, well, history sometimes is unfair, neuroscience was emerging, and neuroscience had to appropriate the vocabulary of something or someone who could talk about the brain scientifically, like input, process, output. Computer science was around, so all of a sudden, you look at neuroscience and talks in terms of computation. Mix the two and you end up by talking about minds in terms of computers and about computers in terms of minds. The mess is unique, is inevitable, and you get Nick Bostrom at the end of that. So with that thing, we're not the only ones. The vocabulary of religion and theology has been appropriated by advertisement all the time. If they don't have chocolate in heaven, I ain't going. Chocolate heaven bars, for goodness sake. Of course, there's Paradise Supreme, but the story goes full circle because, of course, you also have a sinful chocolate. And in case you wonder, there is also chocolate in hell. Now, if you think that this is just a joke, imagine that how lack of imagination hits when you have to advertise AI. We're still on the topic, conceptual borrowing. I need to say something. I need to say it in a way that is convincing. Theology, religion is out there. Let me borrow by the bags. This is how imaginative people can be when they have to present AI. For goodness sake, like, stop using those two hands. Please, please, I'm on record. Okay, please. I'm from Rome. I've seen the original. It doesn't look like that. Actually, you can see it. And honestly, it's a disgrace. So anyone who is the imaginative, creative individual in the room, not today, not here, but outside, we've seen it. We've done it. Move on. So verbally, the same thing, conceptual borrowing from theology. I put those in some kind of, I hope, chronological order. We move from creation to summoning the demon. These are our quotes from AI advertisements, going from AI is the light of creation, to AI is the new Genesis, to AI empowering every soul, the digital Messiah, Holy Grail, summoning the demon. Lack of imagination, really. Can you not develop your own vocabulary? No, there's theology and Christianity out there. Why not going and ransack the whole thing? So, when it comes to the end of the examples of conceptual borrowing, when it comes to the ultimate other, well, we have this little sort of schema, a little bit of table. I'll leave it to you to read it. But we have had, not in that particular order, nature as the ultimate other for a long time, Greek philosophy, essentially. Which was and it wasn't, if you read Nietzsche, other as otherness as we understand it today. It's a very Christian reading of nature. That's why I put God as the ultimate other. Those are the features, but today, if you read about AI, it becomes the new otherness. Well, Ted did a fantastic job in presenting their otherness as, through a number of interpretations. Think about it for a moment, and the powerful, diverse, perhaps savior, perhaps intellectually challenging, judging, superior, etc. All those features that I put there, that was nature, was God, today, for some people, is AI. Now, once again, it tells you more about humanity than the actual topics we're talking about. We're so gullible. We look so much for the obvious. So with the chocolate on one side and the otherness on the other, the topic, then this is just the background, is what happens to hope when there is this endless appropriation of concepts and vocabulary from religion, especially Christianity, but not only, and theology, especially Christian theology, but not only, by anyone who comes up with a new idea. It was political science, according to Carl Schmitt, but today is AI. This is a universe. I just want to look at a particular corner, which is hope. You can do this for different kind of topics. So before doing that, this is not really the right place where to indulge in discussing what hope is, but we need to have a bit of a definition or understanding, common sharing of what I'm talking about. Now, this means essentially not necessarily agreeing with what I'm going to say, but knowing at least where we disagree. Here is a quick summary of what we have had so far. So the religious discourse appropriates the analysis of hope. You'll read your usual Plato, Aristotle, not much talking about hope. When you read about Achilles and how Achilles would rather be a slave alive than where he is the great hero in hellish kind of corner, you know that hope is not part very much of the Greek sort of discourse, but it becomes a cornerstone of Christianity. So religious discourse, for good or bad, appropriates the analysis of hope. However, the political discourse appropriates the religious analysis of hope later in life. Today, if you start talking to people, especially Carl Schmitt onwards, there's a lot of political understanding of what you hope or may not hope. Sometimes people mix the two, but the conveyor, the means is political analysis. What I'm arguing is that technology has appropriated from the political analysis the discourse of hope. So essentially, people stealing from other people. The question, therefore, is what are they borrowing from each other? What is hope? How has the technology discourse appropriated the religious analysis of hope? And I'll show you in a moment. And how can hope be reappropriated? That's the rest of the 20 minutes we have together. So the next slide might look off-putting, but it isn't. And before showing to you, no symbols have been harmed in doing it. We got Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas, Hobbes, Hume, and anyone else after them agreeing on the same idea of what hope is. So if you disagree with the best football team of all times. So I know, good luck. Hope is desire and belief put together with a probability. That little formula there is just a shortcut. it says that A, the little a below the H, call it Alice, H hopes that P, so for example, Alice hopes that she has won the lottery, that's what HAP means, even only if it goes two ways. A, still Alice, D for desires that she has won the lottery. And that's the reverse V. V for vel, for the Latin speakers here, is upside down. She, Alice, B, believes that there is a probability of some kind, no 0, no 1, that she has won the lottery. So you put these two things together. Now, Alice hopes that she has won the lottery means that, one, she desires, and two, believes that she has won the lottery, with some chance, that there's at least one chance in a million that she has that sort of money out there. So keep that in mind, and just remember that the P there for the next 15 minutes, not forever, but just for the next 15 minutes, will be the probability of something that may or may not happen winning the lottery. Something that is accidental, contingent. It's not a necessity, either positive, necessarily true, or negatively, necessarily false. She doesn't hope that the gentleman in question is a happily married bachelor. She cannot hope that, because that is necessarily false. And she cannot hope that 2 + 2 is equal 4, because there is a necessity about that. So you don't have to hope for it. It is a matter of fact. You know that that's the case. She hopes about the lottery. So with that out of the way, let me just remind you that this is perfectly in line with Paul, Romans 8:24, just in case, you don't, the philosopher. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is not hope at all, meaning if you know it, that's not hope. You can't hope that 2 + 2 is equal 4. You cannot hope that this is my hand, unless you are out of your mind, or Nick Bostrom. Who hopes for what they already have? Nobody. You don't hope that you had breakfast yesterday. You did have breakfast yesterday, so etc. So with a little bit of sort of massage and extra analytic tools, but we've been there for a long, long time. It can be formulated. This is just a picture. Enjoy this as a picture. You can believe me, or we can discuss this later over dinner if you really want to ruin your dinner. It can be formulated through something called model logic in a particular corner, or model logic called epistemic logic. That shows that you still keep the habit even if you lose some of the sort of outside appearance. I was a mathematical logician for 15 years. You can't really give it up. But with that thing out of the way, we can discuss that further. How did it happen that this hope, defined in terms of a combination between desire and belief with a probability, was appropriated once being the domain of religious discourse, was appropriated by technology? How did it happen? How do we move to some techno-hope? It takes that analysis. That's why I introduce it. For some corner, sorry to repeat some things that you heard a million times, but there's a famous story. Chekhov says if you have a gun at the beginning of the story, that gun has to shoot at some point. You don't put a gun out there. You don't put all those formulae there just for the sake of the formula. So the formulae shoot now because you need that distinction between desire and belief. The appropriation by technology, or the techno-discourse, basically what you hear all the time, of the discussion about hope has happened on the two sides, the side of the desire and the side of the belief. So we have a desire manipulation. Basically, the industry of technology in general, digital technology, has to increase the desired MP. Are you still using that iPhone with only 3 cameras? Oh, it's 4 cameras now. Seriously, I mean, you outdate the user. Not the technology. The technology is always up to date. You just have to walk into a shop. You, by using an outdated technology, you outdate. And if you don't want to outdate, you better upgrade your technology so you are up to date. And then, belief manipulation. Creating or increasing the belief in the probability that by buying that particular item, you will be fulfilled. If you drive their car, you will be the woman, the man, that you always desired. If you get that particular pen, only their pen, etc., you get the gist. So today, if anyone has been exposed to advertisement by AI, and we've got plenty of companies with which I work, the vendor comes in and says, if you get this AI package, then your desires, your belief will be satisfied. Ta-da! So the promotion, advertisement, of the possession and use of a technology, call it T, DB, desire, belief, manipulates the agent. We are being manipulated in that particular sense. The actual possession of that particular watch, for example, of T, maximizes the probability that your belief becomes something true. So it makes the hope that P equal to the experience that P. Finally, you can wear that watch. Finally, you have those glasses. Finally, you have the AI that does the job for you. So a new belief, a new hope, etc., call it Q, can be the subject of a new hope. There's never a closure. There's constant renewal. What was yesterday the ultimate, the final, the best, the never seen before technology, wait 12 months and it will be so outdated. You can't possibly still be using that particular gadget. We have a new one. But it wasn't like, oh yes, but that's so much yesterday. That must be like what, 2024? So the promoted, advertised technology, T, becomes a talisman. That's why the T there. It's a technology of hope. It starts sort of becoming what you construct as the fulfillment of your belief and desires. Information and communication technologies with a boundless promises of empower are the most powerful talismanic technologies ever devised. Have you ever seen those advertisements? Or if you buy this, you will be so much more productive. I know, I want to be lazy. I said, no, you don't want to be. You can be so much more productive. If you have that laptop which goes twice the speed, blah, 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 it's all about that. If you think that this is just a story, then you would expect this technology to come every 12, 18 months. We just have to forget. Wait for your customers to forget that was the best, the unique, the last. You will never need anything else until next year. Buy another one. This is the map of the iPhone. They come out at a suspiciously irregular time. That regular time is our psychology. That's how long it takes to forget that there was the best, the unique, the only, to be replaced by the next best, unique, only. That was empowering, but this is so much empowering, square, cube. You had 2 cameras, 1 camera, 3 cameras, 5 cameras, so forget about it. So that is how we have been moving. Of course, this means, and I'm also overlapping with some of the technology and the vocabulary covered before by Ted, insofar as the talismanic ICTs are appropriating narrative hope, they crowd out the corresponding religious narrative about hope. Eschatological visions from being religious become techno-utopian. Utopian narrative is mostly commercial. Look around, and the only people who are selling utopian thinking are advertisers. Anyone else knows about tariffs, so there's nothing to love. But everyone else says, oh, it's going to be so great. That's advertisement. And it's the only corner where advertisement looks like this. This is the universe in which we want to live. AI will solve everything, will provide, et cetera, et cetera. And if you suspect that the people saying this live in California, where Hollywood also is, no, you know exactly what the combination. No, it's a dream / movie. No. How can we reappropriate all this? So, conceptual boring, we move from religion to techno hope or techno-utopian. How that it happens, this mechanism of manipulating desire and belief so that you channel the instinct that we all have to hope for the best and have a chance to improve or have a better life along the lines of technology. Technology is going to solve everything. It's going to be the next step. If you don't do it today, it will do it tomorrow. If you don't have that solution, techno-solvism, which is a term in philosophy of technology, will provide the strategy, and on and on and on. Now, I'm oversimplifying. This is a bit of a black and white sketch, but you get the gist. I mean, we can be a little bit more refined and careful. Roughly speaking, we go in that direction. And about 10 minutes and we're almost done. Yeah. So how can we get a better hope? Are we doomed? Okay, well, from now on, fast forward another century and it will be more of the same. There will be more appropriation. In fact, it will be percolating in every corner. Do you have something that cleans the floor in your house? Because look, no, there's so much empowering. Are you still checking that no oil in your tank without having an app? You're not buying the ticket. I mean, it's easy with your phone and on and on. It's everywhere. Now, by the way, all this is provided by someone who is actually quite optimistic about technology, but you need to know what you're buying. So is there a way of getting better hope? This is when, in the next 10 minutes, I remind you that I said that the probability of their belief that you had was about something contingent. Remember, your hope that you have won the lottery is contingent. But what if the hope is not about anything between 0 and 1 in terms of probability, excluding the 0, excluding the 1, but is actually about the 0 or 1, a necessary truth, not a contingent truth? If that is the kind of hope that you're dealing with, it has slightly different rules. So, one step at a time, because we have just about the right amount of time. So, the talismanic ICTs, I mentioned the iPhone more than once, but no, your average car could also be, remember when Tesla was the solution to any problem? Yeah. It's a good reminder of the power of hope. Hope is what we wake up in the morning, what makes you do things that are beyond anything imaginable. There is more power in hope than in the desire to be alive. You can actually die for hope. That's why nothing, not even interest, not for today, but it's the other engine of these two, not engines, sort of airplane, interest and hope and interest, I didn't speak about that one. Interest has been hijacked and appropriated by the economic discourse, but that's another story for another day. Even just sticking to hope can actually override interest to the point that you can wrap up full of bombs and stuff, go into a supermarket and boom. Well, that is certainly not out of interest, given that you're not going to see anything else, but it's certainly for hope for a better life, a different world, justice, and so on, whatever that takes that crazy individual to do that. So hope is the most powerful engine that we ever imagine in terms of human motivation. The control of hope is the ultimate dream of any Nazi dictator. That's why you win an election. You hijack the discourse on hope. If you tell people it's going to be pretty good, we're going to steady on this, yeah, eggs will be a little bit pricey, but they're going down, they're not going to vote for you. You're going to tell them peace in one day, eggs crashing, more money, you're going to be young, beautiful, rich. Anyone? Yeah. So, boom, you win the elections and you are done. I still want to come back to this country, so I'll stop there. The value of hope is not intrinsic, but as the value of what is hoped for. Now, this is the only thing that I think is controversial. I mean, all the other stuff I told you, I think, no, if you don't agree, I think you're wrong. But on this, this is open. Think about it. You hope for something. What is the value of that hope? You, the hoping, or the stuff you hope for? Now, despite me being an agnostic now, I come from a tradition that is inevitably Christian, and you have the impression that it's not you, the hoper, that gives value to the hope, and it's not the acting process of hoping that gives value to whatever you hope for. It's what you hope for. It's a little bit like the currency that gives value to the process and the agent. So the higher the object of your hope, warning, this is a philosophical trick, this is philosophical reasoning, so don't get trapped. But I think it's correct to reason in terms of value of what is hoped for gives value to anything else. The higher the value of that, the higher the value of the hoping and the agents who hope for. If you buy that, and final warning, you don't have to, well then certainly the highest hope that one can possibly have in terms of what is hoped for is the existence of a necessary being, that I said it. As an agnostic, I used to be a believer. So the value of hope, not intrinsic, not in itself, but in terms of value of what is hoped for. Now the object with the highest value of hope is the existence of the divine. Now, I'm sure that plenty of people don't have any belief here, and they might actually be not only agnostic, but actually atheist. I'm with you. This is a logical analysis. So is hope for the existence of the divine rational? Remember, hope was a religious discourse, has been appropriated by the techno-discourse. It's been kind of devalued to hoping that the next iPhone will be cooler than the one I have now. It used to be, a hope in the divine, which was like giving more value, like imagine that is the input of the value in the whole process. Can we regain that? Or something like that. Yes, if it were rational. But if it is like hoping that unicorns will be, running around one day, well, that's not much. If this hope in Santa Claus, well, that's not very helpful. If it is hope that bachelors are happily married, well, we don't have much of an alternative, so we need to kind of downgrade that. So if the answer is, sorry, there is not much, the only thing that we can do is to improve our techno-utopian thinking. In other words, it has to be an entirely secular, techno-scientific correspondence in terms of value of hope. I can see some of you just already thinking, I'm so lost here. Now, remember what I told you that, that formula, the hope was attached to something contingent? And I said, well, the lottery ticket. It was like, it's not necessarily true, not necessarily false, it's a possibility. So the probability is neither 0 nor 1, it has to be somewhere. So you have uncertainty about the contingency. Now imagine that the uncertainty is not about the contingency, but about, because you don't have a contingency, you either have a necessary truth or a necessary falsehood, but you don't know which one it is. So imagine that your hope is at a 0 or 1, but nothing in between. If that is the case, then in the case of the question that we are addressing, if one hopes that P, one believes that it is possible that the desired state of P obtains, that is the existence of the divine. Now, this is also a point on which all philosophers agree. Well, that's another not good news. I put it simply because this is the right place. Either God exists necessarily or does not exist necessarily. There is no, I hope I'm not confusing anyone here. There is no God that exists sometime somewhere or in a possible world but not in another. The existence of this divine entity is necessary, meaning that in any possible world is there, or there is no possible world in which it can be. So it's either the equivalent of a triangle has 3 sides, true everywhere, no matter what, no matter when, no matter who is thinking about, or is a happily married bachelor. Not true, no matter what you do, what you want, what you care. The good thing about being an agnostic is that you don't know. In other words, you don't know whether the divine exists necessarily or the divine does not exist necessarily. If you are truly agnostic, you can't decide. But that is where hope intervenes, because hoping that it may exist necessarily is perfectly reasonable. There is nothing contradictory in hoping that an entity that exists necessarily actually exists necessarily. It's a matter of hope. It's not a matter of reasoning any further than, because in terms of knowledge and logic, you stop at, I don't know. I don't know whether it's left or right. But since it's a matter of hope, I'd rather hope that it will be this way rather than the other. So that was Leibniz for you. So because either God exists necessarily, or if God does not exist, ghosts do not exist necessarily, same non-existence as married bachelors, not as unicorns, just in case. Unicorns don't exist contingent. We've got stranger animals around. And one day, one lab may actually decide to produce a unicorn. So classic analysis of the logical hope needs to be revised in this case. And that's what we get. There is no room between 0 and 1 because it's not a contingent entity. It's not like me not existing. Yeah, I mean, if mom and dad had not met that day, well, poof, no, there wouldn't be a talk here. And it's not like the existence of the 3 sides of the triangle either. Because this remains, and we're coming to the end, remains open, it remains open to hope. So essentially, the whole point here becomes reappropriating the discourse about hope from a techno-utopian perspective to a more sort of, if you like, spiritual or divine-oriented perspective that says, I don't know, but I hope that might go in that direction rather than another. Is the universe a better place if I hope that the universe has some divine aspect in it? And it could be very open in a variety of religious ways. Or would I rather hope that the entity that is the ultimate perfection does not exist necessarily? I'd remind you, I mean, as an agnostic, you stop where your knowledge and reasoning can help you, and you just have to say, like, honestly, I cannot know. I do not know. I have no evidence either way. But if you tell me that you hope that God does not exist, I find it weird, because there is no particular reason to go down that road rather than the other. So if A hopes that God as the being having all perfections exist, A is not irrational, strictly speaking, is just making a choice. Coming to the conclusion, the object with the highest value of hope is the existence of the divine. Can hope for the existence of the divine be rational? Yes. Two important consequences, and we're done. So the talismanic ICTs are a modern form of idolatry, how you pronounce it? Idolatry, yeah, that's me being the Italian here. It's basically hoping that the ultimate secular value of hope will be delivered by some technology. It's slightly pathetic. We can be more ambitious than that. Regaining hope means regaining hope in the existence of the divine. And this is the wrong place where to say this, because I know that there is a Brazilian movement about it, and I'm not referring to that one. I'm not referring to any South American theology of hope, not at all. I'm talking about a theology of hope that privileges hope to faith. We should move away from a theology of faith, A believes that God as the being having all perfection exists, to a theology of hope. A hopes that God as the being having all perfection exists. And with that, thank you.
Ted, come on back up. All right, we have time for questions. Right here with John.
Must be fast. We made it.
Thank you. My question is for Luciano Floridi. I'm wondering if it's possible to hold both of these hopes together in a conditional way, or whether you think that there's some kind of zero-sum or trade-off relationship or unhealthiness in trying to hold both. So suppose that one hopes for the divine, but also conditionally hopes, should there be no divine, then I hope that there's some sort of techno-utopia that's possible. And could one earnestly cultivate both of these hopes in a live way, or is there something about the hope for divine that would crowd out or critique or somehow eliminate the appropriateness of also holding these utopian hopes, even if just conditionally?
Oh, thank you. Absolutely, yes. In my mind, it's a bit like saying, if you can jump higher, can you jump lower? Absolutely. If you can jump higher, yeah, you can definitely jump a bar that is a bit lower. In fact, in a completely different context, and sorry that it was too quick and too much stuff to go through, but that would be exactly the kind of secular semantic capital that I would invite philosophy to develop today, meaning do not expect the transcendent to give meaning to life. Go through life thinking that one day, hope that you may give to whatever is on the other side, if you think there is something on the other side, a present of your meaningful life. In other words, don't borrow from the other side the meaning of your life. Bring as a present to the other side whatever meaning you have built on this side. So hope to me is exactly the hope that there might be a receiver of a present that I build on my own making. So a self-made semantic capital will be the present that I bring to whatever is the transcendent on the other side. That means precisely what you were saying, no? A techno-utopian scientific development of a meaningful life here, which is, if developed, like a talent, that should ring a bell everywhere, is brought to the master as a present without expecting the master to give me all the borrowing sort of value that then I can spend on this side. But it's kind of reversing the picture, and I know that we have a few centuries of the opposite discourse, so I say this with very tentatively.
Yeah, if I could follow up, I guess I'm not sure about what you said, if it answered the question, but because the way you framed it was we need to reappropriate hope. You know, it seemed like there was something inappropriate about hoping for the iPhone or something. And one might say, no, that hope is fine. Just add on this additional hope in the divine, you know. And why not have all of these hopes? And it would be like someone who's, you know, say someone really hopes they can marry woman A, but they also earnestly hope that if they can't marry woman A, they can marry woman B. You know, you might say, well, maybe there's something inappropriate about that second conditional hope. You know, in some way it detracts from the purity of you know, your first romantic hope or something. So I'm wondering if it's sort of like, no, when we have the hope for divine, it's going to somehow lessen or, you know, problematize or render less intense, you know, any kind of hopes we might have in technology. Or if you can just add, you know, just add as many large hopes as you want. I'm just arguing we should hope for the divine, but, you know, these other hopes can rightfully maintain their place in someone's psychology. So I don't know if that clarified the question at all. But
No, I think it clarifies the question. I'm sorry if I wasn't very clear. So the hope for the divine once achieved, cast a completely different light, reinterprets the hope we have for secular achievements in such a way that the hope for the secular achievements becomes a hope to transform those achievements into a present for the divine.
I see, yeah. I get it now.
Does
Thank
that
you.
get better? Thank you.
Thanks. Professor Floridi, could you put your previous slide up just for a sec? Would you mind your last slide? Because it went by really quick, and because it had this sort of eschewing of faith.
Before?
Yeah, that one. No, that one. The one you just had. Yeah. So this connection between faith and hope, and Professor Peters, maybe you can comment on this too. But you know, the author of Hebrews tells us hope is the evidence of things, or faith is the evidence of things hoped for, right, and the confidence of things unseen. So I'm not sure what you mean by sort of giving away faith and having hope, because the connection, at least in the Christian tradition, is a close connection, right, between faith and hope.
That's precisely why I said I'm not a Christian. So of the three things, faith, hope, and charity, we can find one point on which we can all agree, the atheist, the agnostic, and the faithful people, which is charity. Of the two remaining, there's overlapping between the agnostic and the believer, and that's hope. It's only the believer who can have faith. I lost faith, so I cannot go all the way down to number 3, but I'm happy to stop halfway to number 2 and share number 1 with the atheist.
Faith and hope are two different words, but their meaning overlaps considerably. One meaning of faith is trust. I trust God. Even though things look bad, I trust God. Well, that overlaps a lot with hope. I have 3 meanings of faith. The first one is trusting God regardless of the situation. The second one, like pistuo in the New Testament, means I believe X, Y, and Z. I believe what the Nicene Creed says, and etc. Now, both faith and hope are things that we do. Well, I'm a Lutheran, and some of my Catholic friends think like Lutherans that God, the Holy Spirit, places Jesus Christ present in my faith, whether I can feel it or not. Whether my trust falters or whether my belief is contaminated with the doubts, I'm not abandoned, in a sense, by the presence of God. So that dimension is not something that I do either with my mind or even with my tangled heart.
Manuel Vargas.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So this is a question about the characterization of hope. And I'm trying to understand how the characterization, or I guess I'm puzzled about two things about the characterization of hope. So one is just the definition or characterization we got. It looks like it doesn't distinguish between hope and sorrow. So I could despair about the fact that I want something and that I believe that it's possible and accessible, but I might think it's so remote that the attitude I have is despair rather than hope. And it looks like, at least on the formal characterization that we had,
No.
It wasn't
Wrong.
So
You're wrong.
well, thank you.
Well, we can stop there. You're wrong. So
So
I try to be so clear, boringly clear. I say desire and belief. Desire.
right.
What's the desire component in desperation?
In
I desire for
sorry,
something to happen,
in
and I believe that
despair-
that may happen. That's hope.
Sorry. So in despair, I can still want something, and despair, and the attitude I can have about it is despair that the thing I want is inaccessible to me, and that meets the formal characterization
Never mind.
you gave. The second thought was just that I was curious about, and just invite you to say more about, is about whether or not the characterization collapses the distinction between the subpersonal and the personal. So I can have lots of attitudes about things that it would be inapt to characterize me as having the overall attitude, even if there's on some level at which I have subpersonal attitudes about it. So we might say something like, take a person who's got addictions that they're alienated from, and they have desires to do certain kinds of things, but they're alienated from them. They wish they didn't have these desires. In that sort of case, we might say the person, repudiates these desires without the person having the desire to be addicted. So there's this kind of feature about we can be alienated from our desires. And so I was worrying about the characterization you were giving as well about hope, about whether or not it was going to be enough that we have a desire for something. We think that it's got a probability to it, but it might be a desire for something that take the addict case again, where the addict thinks something like, yeah, I desire the drug, but I don't hope to be taking the drug precisely because I've repudiated this desire. So it's an invitation to just say a little bit more about how you're thinking about hope, because these kinds of puzzles seem to me to challenge the.
As I said, the team you're playing against, it's a team you don't want to play against, which was the team that put together the definition, desire and in the logical, strong sense of mathematical logic, and both have to be satisfied, and belief. But I might have overestimated the commonsensical, say, understanding of hope. The one that I presented to you is what we understand in a sort of conceptual, philosophical, logical, rigorous understanding, and is perhaps impoverished, highly impoverished compared to what one may find, I suppose, not very well acquainted, in a religious context. So it really is, you should really read it as simple as, I hope that I won the lottery. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing bigger than that. And when I say, no, the little hope that, remember, an agnostic, one who does not believe, and has strong suspicions that might be all a fable, a story, so is agnostic, but he doesn't quite know, might have that very impoverished, very slimmed down level of hope that there might still be a chance, no zero, remote, but no zero, that there might be a divine something out there, and prefers to, rationally speaking, hope that there is rather than hope that there isn't necessarily. So if I might have misunderstood the point, but if I got it, and it is a real if, it's a very impoverished, very thin, very minimalist sense of hope. Of course, in another context, one might say, well, that's not good enough for me. I want to have a rich, bold, 360 degrees, powerful sense of hope. That's what we really speak about when we hope, for example, that God might be this and that and so on. I hear you, but I'm not a believer, so I cannot share that level of hope.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I have a question in the exact same direction again. Thank you very much for your presentations, because I'm also struggling with that distinction of faith and hope, and I'm wondering whether agnosticism does not, points to not knowing, whereas the idea of hope or the virtue of hope points to not seeing, in the sense of, I'm struggling with these sentences. I'm thankful that you asked for them again. I don't know if one can really apply hope to the question of existence, and I'd say hope applies more to the question of appearance. I think it's possible to believe that God exists or he doesn't exist, but I don't think one can just easily say, I hope something exists. It's like I say, I hope that the sun is going to shine, precisely because I believe the sun exists. You know, I can't say I hope the sun is going to shine if I don't even believe it exists. I see a deep issue there in conflating, I don't know, maybe categories. And I don't know if the hope of God points towards his existence. I think the existence of God is an issue of belief, not of hope.
Yeah, no, you're right. So 2 points for clarification. One is the translation in propositional logic of what hope is about. It's a simplification in order to convey the point. But it's also a reference which I thought everybody caught to Anselm, the ontological argument. The fool said, God does not exist. And what I'm arguing here is that yes, there is a fool. But there's the other side, which the agnostic also holds, which is the fool said God exists. And for the agnostic, both are fools. But he doesn't know whether they're both fools, one is right, one is wrong. So it's caught in this thing. And so in a sort of Anselmian move here, it says, you know what? I don't know who is the fool, who is not, the believer or the atheist. And since I don't know, I'd rather sit with the believer, because there is zero cost in a sort of Pascal-style level. But at the same time, my agnosticism doesn't force me to believe. It can stop at a much more minimalist, impoverished, slim down, hope that. So I don't believe that I won the lottery, but I do hope that there's a lottery there and that I won it.
Yeah, and I think there's one step that I agree up until that point, where just because one does not have to believe, I don't know if from that follows that one can then simply hope. That's, I don't quite get that transition. Because
so, I don't know if anyone remembers that. That's the Pascal argument, no? Which is, it's better behave as a Christian, because, it's a win-win. If you're right, well, you win, endless life, and if you're wrong, well, you led a decent life. No, you didn't lose much, etc. Kind of one way, that argument has been revisited a million times, and there are a million interpretations of it. So that's one of them. So what I'm saying here is that I don't like it. That's the first question, which was to the point. If you have hope for the existence of the divine, that inverts the relationship between what you're borrowing and what you're giving. You're no longer borrowing as a faith in the existence of something that means to provide meaning to your life, but in fact you are assuming that there might be something else. You hope so. But if you hope so, then what you're not borrowing is what you're giving. It's the talents. You just hope that the master will come back. But if you hope that the master will come back, then you better invest those talents, because he will want to know what you did with your talents. So I don't believe that he will come back, but I hope so much that he will. But if he does, that the inference is, I better behave properly because I have something to give. Now, it might be a little too complicated, I'm afraid, but, and I'm not probably doing a good job in explaining it. Yeah.
I think the agnostic can say it would be nice if God existed. I don't think if he can say, I hope God exists, because I think hope logically follows from belief.
No, it doesn't. So those are slides I actually skipped. No, hope and belief are completely different, logically speaking. No, sorry, I apologize. I did skip those slides. So in model logic, the doxastic logic, so the branch of epistemic logic that occupies A believes that P, is a different logic from A hopes that P, demonstrably. So at least we need to agree on that. If you don't, I go completely Aristotelian on this. Those who deny the principles, you cannot dispute.
So I'm afraid we're bumping up against the end of our time. I'd like to take one more question for Professor Peters, if there is one. Yes, thank you.
Just a very brief but a quite broad possibly question. What can be done about the quadrumvirate of Thiel, Yavin, and the other two?
Well, I'm glad you're answering.
We might give them both a chance to answer this one.
I think a lot about this, and I don't have an easy answer. I suspect, and I'd like to talk with Thiel and Musk, just ask them, I suspect that they think they have good motives. I think they want to prevent Putin from getting charge of AI. And so if they take charge of AI around the world, from their point of view, that's preventing the bad guys. Let me just say that follows from what I think may be the case. The part about democracy has to do with this excessive worship of intelligence. And if you worship intelligence and you appoint yourself because you're a STEM person, we are the most intelligent because we've made billions off AI. Ergo, the rest of the hoi polloi, those of us who are not AI software engineers, we shouldn't get a vote. They'll know how to take care of us. So it's a form of intelligentsia that necessarily leads, or not necessarily, but from their point of view, leads to fascism. Because the best people are going to rule. And they're going to rule on your and my behalf. And that seems to be their point of view. Now, if you and I are not members of that Brahmin class, we might object. But as you can see, the police power is growing, so that you and I had better not object, or we'll find ourselves in El Salvador. At any rate, I wish I had as much hope as Luciano does.
Luciano, do you have a 30-second or less response to the question? What to do about this triumvirate?
I hope the midterm elections will make a difference.
We just had our last election.
Okay, there we have something to hope for, I suppose. So please, I'm so delighted that you all came to the conference. I hope you found it rewarding. We're very grateful. Please join me in thanking our final two speakers.
Thank you. Thank you.